And look who else is here, Dr. Phil McGraw.
He is in the 10th season of his top-rated daytime talk show. Hello, Dr. Phil.
Good morning. How are you guys?
We're good.
I love your new digs. I have to say,
really
this is
too,
very
Phil.
nice.
I do too.
It's got a real community sense to it. You know, everybody's talking, plugging in. I love it.
And now we have you at the table. Let's see. I'm thinking number one never gets old, does it?
No,
congratulations to you.
If you're going to be a number,
years.
number one is a good number to be, right?
Let's start talking about the tanning mom, because I am curious about your take on it. She was a big butt of jokes at Saturday Night Live. And they were saying they did an interview with her, and she thought it was very funny. But I thought there was a funny thing when she was accused of taking her little girl into the tanning salon. She said, now that would be ridiculous. As she's sitting there looking like a burned hot dog on the grill, she said, that would be ridiculous. Don't you think that it's more than just possibly taking the girl to the tanning salon, that there's a lot more going on with this mom?
Look, parents have a couple of jobs, right? You need to socialize your child. You need to prepare them for the next level of life. And you've got to keep them out of harm's way. Yes. If, in fact, she's taking that little girl into this tanning booth and putting her in there, particularly to the point that she's getting burned, but at all, that just seems to me to be really running her own agenda. Clearly, she's all focused on this because she looks like, as you say, a hot dog. So maybe she thinks that's cool, all right. But, you know, my dermatologist tells me that most of the damage we have to our skin happens when we're children. So if you're taking a child in there, if she did, she says she didn't, I guess now.
Yeah, she said
I
she didn't.
I don't know. That's not okay with me.
But are you saying just going in the building because she says she didn't bring her in the tanning bed? The guy who owns the salon, who will only give one name, says, look, it never happened. She stayed outside. But is the simple fact of bringing your child in there damaging to them in the building?
Well, I don't know. I think taking her into the building. But look, the most powerful role model in any child's life is a same-sex parent.
Yes.
And here's her mother. I mean, come on.
Yes.
What's she modeling here? Whether she takes her to the building or just walks around looking like she does, the child's likely to emulate that. Not smart. Not smart, in my opinion.
We were talking about the death of Junior Seau, the suicide of
Tragic,
Junior.
isn't it?
Very tragic. I mean, it seems like the NFL is under the gun lately. We keep hearing about a lot of the players end up broke after a very short period of time. You have something with Terrell Owens coming up. And now the belief that maybe it's the concussions that are happening in football that causes this. What's your take on that?
Well, look, we're finding out that there's an awful lot of what's called TBI, traumatic brain injury, that underlies a lot of PTSD. We're seeing it with our soldiers coming back from the war. We're seeing it a lot with players in the NFL and those that are in contact sports. Look, this is serious stuff, and I think it is being terribly underreacted to. What you're seeing, I think, with some of these players is a confluence of factors. Do you have these multiple concussions and traumatic brain injury? If so, that's a bad thing. Then, as we say, close to 80%, it's estimated close to 80% are either bankrupt, divorced, or in serious financial trouble within 2 years of being out of the league.
Why is that, Phil? Why?
Well, the research says that it's because of the hangers-on, getting ripped off by advisors, investment ideas, things of that nature. These are young men who all of a sudden have a fair amount of wealth. You know, the median is $900,000 a year, which is a lot of money, but then there are those that have much more than that. Terrell Owens, who's on our show on Tuesday with 3 baby mamas confronting him about his conduct with them. Can
I just ask how you got all 3 women and Terrell to agree to do the interview?
It felt a little like a firing squad, actually, as Terrell said to me at one of the breaks. But I think the point is, he says he wants to set the record straight. He wants to tell people he's not the person that the media has depicted him as being. I'm not sure he made a lot of progress with these women.
We have a little bit from the interview. Let's show a little bit of that if we can.
I have been raising our daughter to the best of my ability. I've tried to be the best mother I can be. I have always supported you, Terrell, and I think you know that. I have come to your defense all the time because I realize you are my child's father. I would not wish any harm on you. I wish you nothing but the best because I know how I feel as a daughter.
Do you believe what she's saying? You don't believe what she's saying?
Wow. Did he know all 3 of them were going to be there?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. No ambush.
You don't ambush.
No, I don't do ambush. I don't do gotcha journalism. He knew they were coming, and he said he wanted to set the record straight because he said, look, there's two sides to every story. He said, when I call to see the children, they're busy. The mothers don't cooperate. That's why he was shaking his head no. But I mean, come on, he hasn't seen these kids much in year after year, so come on.
Let me turn, there was a time in your life in which you advised people who were going on trial, who were going to appear in the courtroom. I think that's where you met Oprah.
Yeah.
Right.
Look at the John Edwards trial for us and look at it from a juror's perspective. And if you were representing the defendant, what would you be trying to coach them in terms of their presentation?
Well, when we say coach, what we always did was try to get the witnesses to tell the truth effectively. So not create a truth, but to tell the truth effectively. And so I think what he has to do is deal just with that. And you can buy a lot of credibility by acknowledging that some things at least appear to be improper. And what we're dealing with here is not a very sensational trial. All the things that are being, well, that's because everything that's being focused on is sensational. But the real issue is whether or not campaign funds were used for individual gain, for personal gain. That's not a very sexy trial. All this other stuff that's being picked up by the media and will be talked about by the prosecution is to create sensationalism in there. They need to drain the energy from this and focus on what was actually happening here. And I think the fact that someone is a candidate doesn't mean that they don't have separate funds.
But the question is, and you know jurors from that experience that you have had, do jurors separate that in terms of how they feel about the defendant and his character versus whether on the question of law there's been a violation?
It's very, very difficult for them because it's often been said that it's very difficult to be one kind of man and another kind of president, and so they do look at the character, they do look at the private life. And I think that's going to really weigh heavily on these jurors. They don't like the fact that his wife was suffering from cancer while he was out doing this cavorting around that he is accused of doing. And I think all of that spills over into whether or not this money was rerouted. So the job of the defense is to separate that out and say, we are here to make a determination on what happened with this money, what was its intent, and where did it go. And if you can't separate that out, this is going to be a very long trial for Mr. Edwards.
It's hard to focus on that when all the other stuff is so salacious. Would you advise him to take the stand? Do you think he needs to take the stand?
Well, I think you're going to have to make that decision when you see where you are at the time. We always used what we called mirror jurors, where we would match jurors with personalities very close to them that you could debrief every night. If he gets to the point where it's almost over and he is seriously behind, then why not? But if you aren't seriously behind, then I think it would be very difficult to advise him to take the stand.
Suppose he does, and I agree with you, it's not coaching, you're not saying do something that you're not. Authenticity is important. How do you make sure a witness does that?
Well, I think they have to decide what their truth is. And we always, when we say we want witnesses to tell the truth effectively, you find out 3 or 4 things that this is going to turn on, and you stay focused on those things. Everybody tries to float 10 different ideas, 20 different ideas. Look, if you're not going to get the jury with your top 3 or 4, you're not going to get them with 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. You better decide what horse you're going to ride, and you better stick with it. And his is, you may not like my judgment, you may not like my values, but the money here was not for campaign purposes.
Don't fall off of that horse.
Yeah, the horse that ran, I'll have another. Won the Kentucky Derby. Yes.
Before we let you go, we know that anti-bullying is really important to you. And this is a topic of your show today, and I have to say, reading the description of this, it almost made me sick to my stomach. And you're dealing with, specifically today, teenage girls and violence, and it seems it's getting so much worse.
Eric, we seem to have a society now where everybody thinks they need to be on television. They all think they need to be on film. It's like I'm brushing my teeth, turn on the camera. I mean, come on, and now we've got girls that are out fighting, beating each other up, and posting it on YouTube with pride. We have got to stop this. There have got to be consequences when these people create a record of their conduct. We have a young girl in Rhode Island that has a shunt in her brain and gets bullied by some girls who have her on the ground pounding her in the head, and she has a shunt in her brain. Come on. Now, of course, they say you didn't see it all. There were different things going on. Look, I don't care. This is not a good idea, and we've got to tell parents, and it's not just the bullied. Every bully has a parent, and your job as a parent is to know what your child is doing.
Yes.
Dr. Phil, nice to have you at the table, especially after you had us on your set earlier this year. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me back.